Morning everybody, welcome to Talk Tuesday, and today I'm going to be talking all about processing emotions. Now obviously emotions are part of daily life, but we can suppress the ones that we don't like, and it's something that comes up a lot in my work with my Reiki clients. So we don't have a problem with emotions like love and joy. We're quite happy to accept those, but when it comes to what I do call the lower emotions, then we try and avoid them, usually because we just don't want to feel the pain that's involved with them. And we can develop coping mechanisms. You'll know, I'm sure, about things like retail therapy and comfort eating, just designed to try and make you feel better, and maybe using alcohol or drugs to suppress those emotions and to numb the pain. But the problem is that all that does is to mask the emotions, and those emotions are still there under the surface. And even if we don't use coping mechanisms, we can still push them down and try and ignore them, but then they'll get stuck in our bodies. And the problem with that is that we are then carrying them around with us, and they just get added to all of the time. And I guess it's a little bit like a Jack-in-the-Box toy, if you can remember those. We try and put a lid on our emotions in the same way that you do with the Jack-in-the-Box. You know, you shove the toy down, you close the lid, but you know that at some point that lid is going to burst open and the toy is going to pop back up. And it's the same with our emotions. We can push them down all we like, but if we don't deal with them, at some point they are going to pop back up and remind us that they're very much still there. You may have had that situation like I have in my life, when you think you're fine going along, and then somebody asks you out of the blue, how are you feeling? And you burst into tears unexpectedly. Now, I had that once when I was at work, and one of my bosses asked me how I was feeling, and I literally had to run out of the room, because just that question brought to the surface all the emotions and the stress that I'd been feeling that I didn't really realise. And as I say, I literally had to run out of the room, but it was quite helpful because it made me realise that I had stuff there that I needed to deal with. So if we do carry old emotions in ourselves, and as I say, they get stuck in our bodies actually keep drawing our attention to them in an effort to try and get us to deal with them. And we'll keep being presented with situations that will trigger that same emotion again in an effort to make us face it and deal with it. Now, the great Louise Hay said that long-standing guilt is one that can actually cause physical pain, because, as she explains, pain looks for punishment and punishment leads to pain. So to avoid that pain, in that case, you want to deal with that feeling of guilt if you've got it beforehand, because you don't want to get to that stage of having the physical pain. Another example is about grief, because we don't always grieve properly when we should. So it might be grief over the loss of a relationship, as well as possibly grief over the death of somebody that we've loved. If we don't grieve properly, then what can happen is that, well, it will happen that again that stays stuck in our bodies, and then down the line what you can find is that a seemingly quite innocuous situation will lead to a disproportionate response, because what it's done is to trigger that feeling of grief that you've pushed down for all of those years, and then it spills out, tenfold. An example from my own life: back when I was single, I got dumped by somebody after only a few dates, which shouldn't really have been anything particularly bad, but I literally sobbed for an entire day, which was crazy. I mean, completely disproportionate to that particular situation. But I knew that actually what was happening was that it had triggered years and years worth of suppressed sadness, and it had brought it all to the surface. Now, I knew that at the time because I had just recently done my Reiki training, and I'd been taught that Reiki unlocks emotions And so I knew that this particular trigger had brought to the surface all of these emotions that had been unlocked by my Reiki, and they needed to be dealt with. And luckily for me, it happened on a day when I had a day that I could just spend just giving vent to those emotions. So I literally lay on the bed, sobbed for an entire day, got through a whole pile of tissues, but at the end of it, I just felt, well, I felt a bit wiped out, it has to be said, because it's quite exhausting going through all of that emotion. But afterwards, I felt better, I felt calmer, and then I knew that I was ready to go on. So it definitely is worth processing the emotions, because, as I say, that was years coming to the surface. If I'd processed each of them at the time, then it wouldn't have been such a big deal to process it as it was on that particular occasion. So a couple of other emotions that I can just explain some ways of dealing with them for you. Things like anger and frustration. Again, those can be very common to try and push down, perhaps because in the given situation we don't feel that we can give vent to them, but then we really do need to get them out of our system. So if you've got some anger and frustration, a great way to deal with it is to punch it out. I tell my clients about this quite often, and I don't mean obviously punching somebody, but just, pile up a couple of pillows or cushions in front of you and then really give them a good punching, because it helps to get that emotion out of your system. And if you don't want to do it with actual physical props, you can just stand and punch really hard out in front of you. I mean, really with force, a bit like a boxer. Or imagine you've got a punch bag in front of you and just keep thumping until you feel better, until you feel that anger subsiding. That was taught to me at a Kundalini yoga class, and I did that in relation to frustrations that I'd had with my work situation at the time. And I've talked before about how the fact that I'm convinced that's what ultimately led me to leaving that job, because I just really went for it and punched hard to get that anger and frustration out of my body. Excuse me, but it really does help to get it out, and it's getting it out of your body that's key. Now, another thing that we can do if we suppress emotions is to stop ourselves verbalizing them. So we might have, for example, anger about a situation with somebody that we've stopped ourselves telling them about for whatever reason. We just don't want to go through with it. But then again, it gets stuck in our bodies. Our throat chakra can get closed because we've silenced ourselves. So a great way to get that out of your system is to scream and shout. And it does work. And you might be a bit nervous about doing it, but just try it. And as you get into it, you'll be happy to shout louder and louder. Now, you might feel a bit inhibited about doing it if you've got a house full of people. So there are places you can go if you haven't got an empty house. You could find a remote field, an open field somewhere, or a woodland, wherever. Just somewhere out in nature that's empty and open, and you can really just yell at the top of your voice. I don't mean actually yelling words, although you can if you want to. I just mean the kind of that you can do really loudly. Here where I live in North Devon, we've got a lovely long local beach that you can wander along that until you get away from people and yell down there. But if you haven't got anywhere like that, another thing to do is to just get into your car, drive somewhere quiet, keep all the windows up, and then just yell and shout and scream in your car for as long as you want to. The important thing is just to keep going for as long as it takes. And if you've had enough on that occasion, but actually on another occasion you think, I'm still feeling it inside, I still need to get it out, just go and do it again. Just keep doing it until you have got rid of that emotion that you have stopped yourself from expressing. So the basic message, if you're holding on to emotions, is to process them whenever you're feeling them. I have Reiki clients who come to me because they've got years and years of suppressed emotion, and it takes a long time to unlock them, but it is possible. And the reason it takes a long time is because they are really stuck down a long way in people's bodies. And it's a bit like having a weight. If you imagine like a massive block of a weight tied round with a rope attached to it and then tied round your middle, and it's kind of like walking through life dragging that with you. What you need to do is to let go of that weight, and you can do that by processing the emotions in whatever way that you choose to do. But as I say, I know because of the work I do that Reiki is a good one. But however you do it, whatever's best for you, when you finally process those emotions, it is like untying that rope from around your waist, leaving that block of weight behind you, and then you can move much more freely through life because you're not carrying that massive burden with you. So it's very, very worth doing. So I hope that helps you, and as always, if you feel that you need a little more help with processing your emotions, then just give me a call. I've got a booking system. You can find it on my website. You can have a free 30-minute call with me. All you need to do is click that book now button, and you can go into my diary to find some time when you can have a free chat with me. So thanks as always for watching, and I will be back here again next week. So bye for now.